All right, trivia question. What does the word gospel mean? What do you think that word means? The gospel, a gospel.
It's like to preach, to tell.
To preach or tell? Okay.
Just word to sum up of all the books that are in the Bible as some sacred texts.
Okay, sacred texts.
Good news.
The good news. Yeah. No one thought it was this when I've read the Bible a few times now, so I'm in more of agreement with Paula. But for a long time, when you said gospel, this is what I thought of. People like Southern Baptists with the robes, and they're like dancing, and they're singing, and they're getting it. I tell you, I went to, when I went on the mission trip, Steph, that song jarred my memory. When we would go to New Orleans on a mission trip, we would go to a Baptist church down there. And they had like the choir, and on Sunday, they were in suits and hats, and they went to church, right? And they were singing and dancing and yelling and shouting, and I was like, this is cool, but what's happening? It's so weird. It's so different from our experience, our very white bread experience of church. Very different. But gospel it is the good news, and it is books. They call it the four texts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, right? Because that is the first-hand accounts of Jesus, and Jesus came to bring the gospel, the good news. And when you do like a search of gospel in the Bible, the first times you hear that word in the Bible, they're talking about good news coming. So when there was like a battle or a war or something going on, they had runners. They basically hired cross-country runners. So when the battle would turn or something would happen, someone would run from the battle, run the 20 however many miles back to the city and tell them the good news. So they had lookout people on the tower, be like, a runner's coming. And then they could also tell by how many runners. I also told them if it was good news or bad news. I don't know. We don't need runners anymore to bring us good news. We have the news on TV to tell us, on social media, to tell us news. And we are always looking for the good news, right? And we watch the news to see what's happening. And this last week, in the last 2 weeks, people have been watching the news to see what was happening with Damar Hamlin. That was good news. We were all waiting for this good news. People kept saying, like, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? We were waiting to hear good news out of that situation. And I'm sure you guys have all heard the story. Quick recap. Some of us in this room were there. In the Bengals-Bills game, Damar Hamlin's a player for the Bills. He took a hard hit. Just a regular hit, but it hit just at the right time. And he went down, and he was unconscious on the field. They did CPR for 9 minutes. It was scary. It was really scary. And in that moment on the field, I imagine it was quite quiet. And the people there needed some good news. And they were waiting. And as I read about it, they're like ESPN, they said that like the announcers didn't even know what to say. Like, we don't even know what to say. Like, we have no news. And we don't know what to do about that. And it was scary. And what I loved seeing coming out of that situation was the way that other people reacted. The teams surrounded him with their backs to him so that everyone in the stands wouldn't see how traumatic, especially for kids who were there, to see them doing CPR. That would be terrible. They surrounded him. Players came together from both teams, were hugging each other, holding hands, praying. Players came together on the field and prayed together. I saw this video in some sections, like people in the stands. I'm sure people in the stands were praying. I saw a video of a couple people. They stood up in their section and got their entire section to say the Lord's Prayer together. Every single NFL team posted praying for Hamlin on their socials. Every single one. And I forget the guy's name. Dan Orlovsky prayed on live television. He's an ESPN guy. Prayed on live television. I don't know if that's ever happened before. For someone to pray, he's like, I just felt like I had to do it. So here's this guy on ESPN, which is not a Christian channel, praying out loud. And I love that both the Bills coach, Sean McDermott, and their general manager, Brandon Beane, both praised God when it was over, the way that it happened. People went to the hospital. Fans on both sides went and did a prayer vigil overnight. Everyone, almost all my friends on social media were posting, pray, 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 pray. Like everyone was saying pray, the power of prayer. And I imagine, like even Damar himself has posted, thank you for all the prayers. God came through. Like he is giving credit to God for what happened in that moment. See, when I asked you guys back in Lent, or not Lent, sorry, Advent, I asked you guys, what do you hope for? Like, why Jesus? And the people who told me their answers said, oh, because I'm hoping for eternal life, or I want to see my family, and, when I die, and that's great. Those are good reasons to hope for Jesus. But sometimes we need Jesus right now. We don't need Jesus years and years down the road. Some of us need hope. We need something to hold on to right now, because sometimes we get into situations where we see no logical way out of it, or it's dark, or it's scary, or we get some bad news. We get bad news, and we need some good news. We need something to hold on to, something good to hold on to. We need a promise that we're not alone. We need strength to get through a hard time. All those the fans, the Bills and the Bengals fans, and fans all across the nation, and his family and his team, we needed strength, and we needed something to hold on to over that, especially overnight while we were waiting on news. We needed something to hold on to, and that was hope. And that is what Jesus brings. Jesus brings hope. And as Christians, it's our job to carry that hope and to spread that hope. So in the stands and on the field, as people came together and said pray, or showed that they were praying, or asked people to pray, they were asking people to hope. And I love that. I love that we are told in the Bible to hope for things that seem impossible, things that seem scary. One of my favorite verses, it's like so much my favorite, this is my background on my phone. It says, blessed is she who believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. We are blessed when we believe that the Lord can come through. When we put something out there and say, Lord, I need you to do this. We need you to come through in this situation. God says you are blessed when you believe that I can come through for you. When you believe that there's something better that can happen out of this situation. So without hope, people give up. Think if all those people didn't have any hope, how scared they would be going into that. When you are helpless, how scared you give up. You're like, I can't do it. I can't get through this. I have a friend, she's got an 18-month, they just rang the bell yesterday, her 18-month with cancer. They just rang the bell for the final treatment yesterday. I don't know how she gets out of bed without hope. She's a believer. She has very much been leaning on the Lord in this time. I don't know how you do it without it. I really don't know how you watch your 18-month continually going back to the hospital and get up every day if you don't have hope that God can come through. Because that's scary. I don't know how the players could have kept going without hope. They needed that hope. And I hear when something bad happens, this is a pet peeve of mine. People are like, my thoughts are with you. Oh, you're feeling sorry for me? You have bad thoughts. You're like thinking happy thoughts? Gee, golly, thanks. That's super helpful to me. It does not help me at all if you're thinking for me. That's great. But if you're praying for me, I believe that helps me. You know what I mean? Like, to me, prayer is I'm activating God to come in a situation. Just thinking sad thoughts, now you're just feeling sorry for me. No thanks. I need you to pray for me. I need you to do something that will actually help me. And just feeling sorry for me is not going to help me. As Christians, we are called to hope. We are called to be light bearers. I love this. Where'd it go? I've been laylately in the Bible, he takes me to different verses. And in the last month or so, he has taken me all three. This verse is in this story, is in the Bible 3 different times in 3 of the Gospels. And God keeps taking me to it. And I think it's interesting that I have been reading it and I'm like, oh, I just read that, but not this version. And basically God says, here's another one. I love the Message version. I know I don't usually use this one, but I like this one. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors of the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public. And as public as a city on a hill, if I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand now that I've got you there on the hilltop. Be a light, shine. Keep open your house. Be generous with your lives. Open up to others. Prompt people to open up to God and their generous Father in heaven. God's saying, every single one of you who believes in me, you're a candle. You're a lantern carrying my light wherever you go. You're not to keep your light hidden. And in that stadium, things were dark. Like in a movie, if that would happen in a movie, the clouds would have come over, right? Like it would have darkened if this was a movie scene. In that situation, there was a spiritual darkness descending there, and the people who were Christians, the people who believed in God, turned on their lights. And they started to pray. And they started to say, guys, don't get down. God can come through. God can do this. There is hope. And they brought light into that situation. And that is our job. When there's a bad thing happening, to not say, oh, my thoughts, I'm feeling sorry for you. But to bring hope, to bring prayer, to say, God, you know what? God can come through. Let me tell you a story similar to yours of where God came through. Let me tell you what the Bible says about this situation. God says he can come through. God says he can raise people from the dead. Damar Hamlin was down. They did CPR for 9 minutes. You guys, he was dead for 9 minutes. They did CPR. That means he was dead for 9 minutes. And they brought him back. God can bring people back from life. God can heal. God can reconcile. God can bring healing. God can bring hope. God can save your life and restore what has been lost and broken. He can restore lost time. He can restore lost finances. God brings hope. Jesus brings hope. And so our job then as Christians is to be light bearers. That hope is a light, and it is our job to shine. It is not our job to go hide in our house and hide our light and keep it all and hoard it all to ourselves. It is our job to shine it on to others. When you have given your heart to the Lord, it is your job to shine that on to other people. Peter says it this way. He says, but in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord, and always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. You have hope, and people are going to say to you, how can you be positive? This is a terrible situation. How can you be optimistic right now? And that's what you say, because I believe in the Lord. And God doesn't say, I need you to go door to door and pound and like drag people into loving me. God says, no, be a light, shine when there's darkness, and people will naturally say, how can you believe this is going to work out? And that's when you can say, it's because I believe in God. Let me tell you how God has come through for me. Let me tell you about this other situation where I saw God come through like this. Our job is to be light bearers wherever we go. To believe, to hope. When we see a bad situation, to not be like, oh man, this is going to be terrible. But to say, this is terrible, but God can come through. Our job is to step up and be those courageous people who led a whole section of people in the Lord's Prayer. To be that bold. To post, I am praying. To post, pray for this. Prayer works. To come and hear a terrible situation, be like, can I pray for you? Or to hear of a terrible situation, be like, you know what? God can come through in this situation if you let him. And so I have some homework for you. Last week, your homework, I don't know if any of you did it. Did any of you guys do your homework? Did anyone write down your list of people and circle the Christians in it? Oh, you guys all get an F. Your homework last week was to write down the people you see on a regular and talk to on the regular and circle the ones that you know are Christian. And then you have a list to work with, because the people who aren't circled, that's our target audience, right? We each have a story of hope. Every one of us has a time where God has come through for us. We have experienced God, where we have had a hopeless situation and God brought reconciliation. God brought healing. God brought financial abundance where we thought it was going to be bad. Something. We each have those stories where God came through, where we prayed and God answered. And so I want you guys, now do your homework this week. I'm going to have a grade book up here and start grading you guys. So I want you guys to prepare your stories. Remember them. Write them down if you need to. What are times in your life where God came through? What are times in your life where you prayed and God answered? What are the times in your life where God saved you? Because we've each had those, maybe we haven't died physically, but we've each had those moments where we thought we couldn't get through. where we faced a situation that was just crippling. And we turned to God. Like, I remember, for me personally, mine happened about 4 or 5 years ago. I remember sitting, I called my God chair, and I was sobbing. I'm like, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. This is too hard. I feel depressed. I'm so sad. And I'm listening to music, and the song that came on was something like, just put one foot in front of the other. I've got this. God's got this. God will come through. I just need you to get through today. And I was like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you to get me through this. Each of us have had those moments. I need you to remember them so that when you're the one praying at the ball game, when you're the one praying when bad news comes, and someone says, how can you possibly be able to get through this? How can you possibly be optimistic in this? You can be like, let me tell you a story. Because stories change people. Stories affect people. Facts don't affect people, but stories affect people. So we need to remember what our stories are. I'm one of those people that once I get through something hard, I forget about it. And so it's good for me to write it down because I remember. It's good for me to write down my answered prayers because then when I'm like, God forgot about me, I can be like, hold on, I got this jar here of papers that tell me otherwise. So I want you guys this week to remember and to write down somewhere on a post-it note or in a journal times where God has come through for you. Times when God has come into an impossible situation and brought something possible out of it. Where God has healed and reconciled and brought provision when logic said this is going to be a soup sandwich, this is going to be terrible. So that when people ask you, you can share. And think about those uncircled people on your list. Is there a story you can share with them that might resonate with them about ways that God has come through for you? Because that's how we win them over. We win them over with love, and we win them over showing them how God has come through for us. So all of God's people said? Amen. Amen.